To the dear media establishment, I am not entirely certain if you are aware of this, but 1984 was a warning, not an instruction manual. And to everyone who's not a member of the global media elite, hello, you magnificent bastards! Glad you tuned in. I am Dr. Lehman, and today's topic is German news and their coverage of the Berkeley protests. But before we do that, do me a big one and click the bell icon below the video, just to make sure you actually do get notifications about new videos of mine. YouTube has been pretty weird about this lately. Let's do this. Before we talk about Berkeley, let's talk a bit about the German news system. I promise it'll be worth your time. It's probably one of the biggest red pills on German news there is at the moment. A lot can be said about the German news system. Sadly, most of what can be said isn't good. A good chunk of the so-called public broadcasting services is controlled by political parties and their offshoots, and has long since become a megaphone for the German establishment to insult and belittle anyone who doesn't agree with it. In a study by the Prometheus Institute from the year 2015, for instance, we'll find that 31% of all people on the board of directors of those public broadcasting services are directly members of political parties, and those who are not, for example the 10% that are labor union members, the 9% that are members of various religious organizations, and the 3% that are members of minority rights groups, all of those have very clear political biases and affiliations. Out of the political party members specifically, 32% are members of the Social Democrats, the mainstream left wing. Another 32% are Christian Democrats, the mainstream, sorta but not really right wing. They are also accompanied by 9% who belong to the Christian Social Union, basically their daughter organization, and 11% are green. So basically, we've got a split between the mainstream appeasement left wing and the mainstream appeasement right wing. But it's not just the board of directors that are politically biased, the actual journalists are just as bad. According to a 2010 study by Lunenburg and Berghofer, we'll find that 26.9% of all journalists are green voters, even though the Greens received only 10.7% of all votes during the election of the year 2009, making the radical left wing hilariously overrepresented. On the other hand, only 9% of all journalists support the Christian Democrats, making the somewhat but not really right-wing hilariously underrepresented in the journalist establishment. What an absolutely fantastic state of affairs, isn't it? Most news, if they are not dictated by the political establishment, overall come from just a few central news agencies. For example, the German news agency dpa alone had a total market share of 52% in the year 2010. With a setup like this, it's no surprise that you're able to find massive, politically motivated lies on every channel at any given time about any given topic. My favorite example of all time is, of course, violent video games make you violent. That's a craze from the early 2000s, where the level of journalism sank to a yet unprecedented low.
Ein Großteil der Schüler kommt mit diesen Videospielen in Kontakt, viele metzeln stundenlang. Und dabei sollte doch nach Erfurt alles anders werden. Erinnern Sie sich noch an den Jungen, der in seine Schule marschierte und unter Lehrern und Schülern ein Massaker anrichtete? Er soll mit einem brutalen Videospiel das Zielen trainiert haben. Danach wurde gut gemeint das Jugendschutzgesetz geändert und alles wurde schlimmer. Rainer Fromm über Massenmord als Kindersport.
Documentaries and news reports like that one were a daily occurrence back in the day, and in many ways, the clip I just showed you was one of the more, let's say, harmless, comparably even impartial ones, so I think you can imagine just how bad it was back then. In the early 2010s, Libya received exactly the same treatment. The Gaddafi is literally Hitler, let's liberate Libya craze completely dominated all news and narratives. Even in this supposedly enlightened age of free journalism, German news are one continuous failure, disappointment and embarrassment. But just a few days ago, the German news establishment embarrassed itself more than ever. I'll just let the video speak for itself.
Die Stimmung wird immer explosiver. An der Universität Berkeley schlug friedlicher Protest gegen einen ultranationalistischen Gastredner bei einer Podiumsdiskussion sogar in Gewalt um. Trump droht der Elite-Universität jetzt mit Geldentzug.
What you just saw was the 8 o'clock news by the German channel Sat.1. Peaceful protesters essentially being forced to turn just a teeny bit violent against a radical, ultra-nationalist super-Nazi. Right, that's a very interesting frame you've got there, my dudes. Here's how it actually looked like. This, my dear establishment, is the face of your tolerant, progressive left free of hate. And if you think that I just cherry-picked that one news report from Berkeley, it's not really cherry-picking if just about no one else covers it in Germany. The one other source with somewhat of a reach that did cover it is Spiegel Online. Just so you get the rough idea on where Spiegel, one of the biggest magazines in Germany, stands on Donald Trump and journalistic integrity, those are their two Trump-related covers. The first one reads, "Insanity, America's agitator." The second one puts Donald Trump into a pose similar to a beheading by the Islamic State. Yeah, totally 100% neutral, impartial, objective news, I guess. Now, you know, the saying, "don't judge a book by its cover," still holds true in this case, but it's not a book. So yeah, go ahead and judge it by its cover, because it's exactly what you get. The relevant article, the one dealing with the Berkeley riots, carefully avoids mentioning any physical violence by the protesters and instead says, as protesters started fires, broke windows and tore down barriers, the police stepped in. In fact, the article goes out of its way to hide the fact that the violence we've seen so far during Milo's college tour has been almost exclusively coming from his opponents. At one point it even states, at the moment he is visiting universities throughout the USA and giving speeches. Over the course of this tour, there had already been violent escalations between supporters and opponents of Yiannopoulos. And while Spiegel Online is really quiet about actual physical violence, it's really quick to pick up on cyber violence. Yiannopoulos, whose Twitter account was banned for life last year for starting a hate campaign against black actress Leslie Jones from Ghostbusters. Just 8 hours after this train wreck of an article, Spiegel then followed up with this. Trump threatens to cut the funding of the elite University of Berkeley. The entire article mentions the escalations of the protests only in one single paragraph. About 150 masked agitators are alleged to have started violence, according to the university. Amongst other escalations, Molotov cocktails were allegedly thrown, and the police were allegedly attacked with fireworks. Molotov cocktails. And fireworks. Molotov cocktails.
Non-violently, but I think that's a very rare thing indeed, so thank you.
Are you surprised, ma'am?
And fireworks. Allegedly. This, my dudes, this is contemporary journalism. If you've got the wrong opinion, nobody gives a single frig about you, and even helps to hide the crimes committed against you. And speaking of you, the viewer, I kinda played you admittedly. I omitted one tiny detail that's really important for this video. I'm going to show you a short clip, and I dare you, I double and triple dare you. If you rage, you will like this video. If it leaves you completely cold, feel free to dislike the video. Focus especially on the transition that happens in the video and the implication that transition makes about who's to blame here. Also, the second part of the clip I'm going to show you should be really familiar to you.
Für undemokratisch halten den amerikanischen Präsidenten 67% der Befragten. Und schadet seine Politik Amerikas Wirtschaft und Ansehen? Mit Ja antworten sogar 85%. Die Stimmung wird immer explosiver. An der Universität Berkeley schlug friedlicher Protest gegen einen ultranationalistischen Gastredner bei einer Podiumsdiskussion sogar in Gewalt um. Trump droht der Elite-Universität jetzt mit Geldentzug.
Yeah, you saw right. They actually used completely worthless polls that mean nothing at all to discredit Trump, and then basically made him responsible for letting the peaceful protests in Berkeley escalate. But even if we take all of what I said together, compared to what I have in store for you right now, it's basically nothing. This is the most wonderful shit cherry on top of a fuck shit sundae. The BR study about media trust. According to this pretty recent representative study of media trust, we'll find that 75% of all Germans find the public broadcasting service to be trustworthy. And 73% find daily newspapers to be trustworthy. And 63% find magazines, just like the one used in this video, Spiegel Online, to be trustworthy. They are feeding the German people shit, and the Germans even compliment them for it. Good going, Germany. You never disappoint. But to be fair here, there is a positive trend in criticizing the media establishment for what it is. Essentially a megaphone for the political, social and economic elite. Sometimes under the wonderful term Lügenpresse, something akin to lying press in English. But this trend is simply not enough yet. Most Germans still blindly believe in whatever the media tell them. So there you have it. Milo, even though being a homosexual that prefers black men, is a radical Nazi. Trump is directly forcing otherwise peaceful people to utilize violence. War is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. I am Dr. Layman, glad you tuned in, and as always, Babylon prevails.